Hi folks, Jay Haft here again. Episode number 6. Beaver Dam and the state of Wisconsin, a corrupt criminal enterprise. And then the subtitle, A True American Horror Story. I'm going to show you the sign again. This is some of the people you can contact and tell them you want them to investigate the disaster funding in Beaver Dam. And like I said before, it's not just me, it's a lot of people. Okay, I want to say these are all my opinions, and I'm going to talk about the Wyco building a little bit. That's the old shoe factory in town. They have river frontage, lake frontage on there, a huge parking lot. My opinion, what they should have done with the Wyco building, if they weren't so busy with all this corruption, you know, and the city loses out because that's an illegal development. I don't know what they're going to do with that building once the whole story comes out. And like I said before, I don't think you guys should be paying their property tax for them. Okay, you know, my idea for that area was if they, you know, could take their head out of their sand, they call it, was there was plenty of money available after the flood, and seeing how the Waco building had some water in it, that the DNR does a lot of times is they put buildings into the floodplain because of the water from the 100-year flood. They could have probably got a grant for that building, tore that building down, and build a huge, beautiful park there. See, the DNR, they give out this stewardship money just exactly for this. And, you know, they could have a shelter, you know, I know they like bridges. You put a little bridge going back and forth, some sidewalk, some grills and stuff, maybe even a little playground equipment, which would complement the other part of this idea. So where the parking lot is now, there's plenty enough room. They could have built a really nice building there, you know, put some luxury condos in there, you know, and I'm sure a developer would have loved to have that. The city could have actually got property tax revenue for that. They could have sold that land for, like, I'm guessing, you know, like I said, $300,000 to $500,000, and they would have had enough money to pay for most of the park and stuff. It would have been a great thing for the community. So now it's basically a total lose for everybody involved with this. Okay. I want to apologize for the length of the last episode, but if you get a chance to watch any episode, you should watch 5. And I ask you to share, please, because we want to get this story out. We want to get the truth out. Because one of the bigger things with me in this is get the truth out to the people in the community. That it wasn't Jay Haft, that never was. Okay, so now I'm going to start my program. I'm going to focus on today, this addendum they had made him sign, and then Michael Furchall's role. Start out with this. My losses are unimaginable. The city, the Commerce Department, the Wisconsin DNR, and the other state officials are 100% responsible for not just my losses, for everybody's. Because if you were in business, you know, they did come back 5.5 years and pay the people relocation, but if they would have done it before that, the city wouldn't have lost all these businesses. I got caught in the middle of a huge wheel conspiracy, and with the city and DNR's blackmail of the other 10 property owners, it's virtually impossible for me to be treated fairly and legally, and I'll explain that a little bit. The city had the other property owners sign an addendum stating that no property would be treated legally, basically what it says. So the only way to treat me legally was, for my property, was to go back and treat everyone legally, which eventually happened, but the relocation still and losses is another story. No one was paid for their losses. Many of the business owners walked away, like I did at first, because of the fraudulent statements from the city and the DNR on the 50% rule on non-conforming properties. You tell me, if you were Jay Haft, would you want to run a business in this town as corrupt as it is? You know, would you sell your property for 65% of your assessed value? Then they actually went to 100% of your assessed value. When you had $250,000 in your building, and you knew you were legally entitled to an appraisal. Under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution, they must pay you just compensation for any property taking for a public project that receives funding. Okay. when they did everything to ruin me completely. Not only was my business destroyed, but my life and my reputation. Beaver Dam's Mayor Tom Kennedy, a proven liar, is an expert with no respect to the citizens of his own town, with the goal to destroy the citizens' lives. There's no way I could have relocated without a loss of business, because they had already destroyed what I had. And then for the fourth time, receiving funding for my property. They couldn't go back and treat the people legally. The city and state showed no remorse for their atrocities, never admitting or saying they were sorry, and going back and not following the Uniform Relocation Act. HUD, instead of recognizing all the civil rights violations and corruption, they chose to help cover it all up and give the criminals blessing along with more funding. People that go to work every day, join the military, and pay taxes deserve better, not this. But HUD not caring about the laws and the corruption by giving a small slap on the hand, it has only emboldened the state of Wisconsin, which we will see in the next chapter. My loss is due to the constant and total defamation of my characters. It was impossible for me to get a job locally. No employer would even give me an interview. I applied over a dozen times to multiple jobs. No one wanted to touch me. They felt it was me and not the city because of the city's constant manipulation of the media. When the city received funding under the Stafford Act, they could have helped at least 30 families, but had no desire to ever help the citizens. Flood recovery money is for helping people in your community, but they had other motives, like not only helping no one, but to ruin them for financial gain for illegal development. Beaver Dam and the state of Wisconsin are clearly a criminal enterprise, not part of a democracy. I really don't know how they can fly an American flag over their building. Okay, and this goes up to the addendum, round of threats. The city called a meeting approximately 2 weeks after the first round of blackmail. The property owners were all upset. So this meeting, the city's building inspector entered the conspiracy, telling property owners was actually a difference between the floodway and flood fringe properties. Then they made their focus on the 11 floodway properties, telling the floodway property owners that the DNR would not allow us to fix our buildings and give false statements on the 50% rule that the city and DNR conspired to. They told the 11 property owners if we didn't sell our property for 65% of our assessed value, the DNR would order your properties down and would have to pay for demolition costs. This again is definitely blackmail, done with threats, fear, and ultimatums. So this is already 28 counts of this conspiracy to commit blackmail. The Beaver Dam building inspector's job is to enforce the floodplain ordinances on a fair and equal basis, but allowing and permitting of an illegal development discriminating against its own citizens. The property owners were already devastated by the flood. They didn't need the threats and the stress. I met the city and explained the laws, and they didn't care. What happened to the laws and the constitutions? No negotiations, no appraisals, relocation plan is supposed to have to be done before an offer, no just compensation. You're not legally allowed to coerce any property in a purchase. And then all the laws of the Stafford Act, which I explained, like duplicate funding. What happened to the laws and the Constitution? My business flooded in the flood. I had approximately 3 feet of water in the basement because the city gave no warning when they pulled all the boards and the major flooding occurred. My basement was a total loss: heating system, water heater, ice machine, soda system, cleaning equipment, supplies, tools, entire inventory of beer and liquor, grill, walk-in cooler. So it was under the influence that I couldn't fix my building. Then that's a false statement. And after I got the letter, the city was applying for a grant. I closed for 5 months because I thought it was helpless. This email dated June 24, 2008. They were already planning their 50% scam, and the city wouldn't let us enter our buildings without an inspection. So they set us up a bogus inspection span, hiring an engineer from Milwaukee and sending false data to property owners like me. And then I want to get into Michael Furchow, because he made a bunch of statements, about me and my building and stuff on the radio. I mean, it went public. It was in the paper for sure. And, trying to make me look bad. And I guess he ended up working for the city, or with the city, And, well, the thing is, I heard it from one of his employees. I heard it from a city official. But I also have in the emails here, I can show you why. I'm going to say this. I don't know if it's true or not. I heard it like 5-6 times. that actually Tom Kennedy and Michael Furchow were having an affair. But like I said, I don't know if it's true or not, but Beaver Dam's a funny town. So this here is an article out of the newspaper when Furchow was actually fixing his building because they were worried about it being collapsing. And they said if it did collapse, it could block the river and possibly, I say possibly, cause the flooding of the foundry with a catastrophic explosion. That's a worst case scenario. But still, public safety is number one. Okay, and this is from this article. If I had to guess, we could gain some citizen support for some park space downtown, Hanka said. Maybe we can turn this into a real positive. This was when Mayor Hankus was mayor, and Kennedy took over shortly after there. And this is what Furchow says. If I don't stabilize the buildings now, I'd be doing a great disservice to my neighbors up and down the river should a portion of the building fall in the river. I feel like I'm doing the right thing, Furchow said. And then the DNR, was right there watching them. The DNR could fine Furchow, set abatement, or refer the case to the Department of Justice. But if Furchow works with the DNR toward eventual removal of the building, there's a possibility the DNR would back off. So they kind of put him in a bad place. And there is some structural failing. And then this is the DNR. We have informed him that because of the laws, our position, if he exceeds that 50% rule, the building must be removed from the flooding. And then they had said in there that he had spent $25,000, but that's, I explained to you last time, that's ordinary maintenance. I mean, that's considered emergency condition, I would say. Okay, this is another email from Ken Johnson to Michael Furchow's response. So, yeah, it was sent to Michael from the DNR. Okay, in response to an email that understands and sympathizes with your current investment in commercial building, and it says, we are currently working in the process with the Beaver Dam Inspection Department at Beaver Dam to better understand their floodplain ordinance and ensure their ordinance administration is consistent with the minimum state standards. Well, that's the thing, it's a statewide standard, so I don't know what that means. To be clear, this is certainly a structural repair more than ordinary maintenance. Because of this, a permit should be necessary and the 50% rule doesn't apply. Now, I just showed you that yesterday on episode 5 that emergency repairs are not considered on there. But see, these people actually work for you. Okay. Now, this here is off one of the city's downtown plans. It kind of explains what they're doing here. City acceptance of the offer to sell would be contingent on the following: sellers terminating and any all leases prior to closing. And the people in the apartments, too. I mean, they basically got thrown out on the street in this whole thing because they made you evacuate the buildings. I mean, they had nowhere to go. Sellers holding the city harmless of any liability or loss from the sustained flooding. Okay, that's kind of interesting if you watched my episode 2. Sellers acknowledging that neither they nor their tenants will be entitled to any relocation benefits. Sellers acknowledging the offers are contingent on all 11 properties closing in a simultaneous fashion. City receiving all necessary DNR approvals, demolition, restoration, and the environmental indemnity, which is like environmental protection, which I will go through. But the big thing is the city did negotiate with that. And I don't know how the DNR could give that to them because they're the ones that helped with the blackmail. Receiving all necessary approvals for the creation of the TID 6 and the amendment of the TID 3 and receiving all necessary city funding approvals. So they basically were getting the TIF money in the TID money at the exact time that they were doing this, even though they got a grant shortly after. Okay, so that's that. This is another interesting email here. This is from Ken Johnson to, let's see, Mary Volkberg, James Connon. Mary Ellen C. answers below. I have a few questions to answer a meeting request and to do prep work on a Fed stimulus package. Is this project or parts of it shovel ready? Yes. There are 11 buildings involved. The city has received 9 accepted offers to purchase. The 10th is the delinquent and cannot be reached by the city. The 11th, because he basically left. You know, he thought it was hopeless because of all the false threats and, you know, the blackmail. So the DNRs agreed to begin enforcement action on the ER bar, which they never did and could do. So 9 buildings will be ready to go after closings in March. I would assume building 11, it will take a little longer. The ER bar will not be part of the package, even though I was in the funding. Okay, and it says, is Alderman Baldwin leading the effort for the city? The measure enjoyed wide support by the council and passed 12-2. The city's economic development coordinator, Trent Campbell, who's been kind of silent in here because he's kind of sneaky, so he really didn't put himself out in these emails. Trent has been one of the key folks we've dealt with. And then in the bottom it says, is the mayor involved? Absolutely. We had several meetings with the mayor and his aides running up to the vote. Originally last winter he was much on the fence with this issue, but I got the feeling that he is now one of the key supporters of the city's downtown development program. You know, because I don't know if you ever met Tom, but he has an ego problem. This is another email which involves Fairchild, and this is why the city pretty much had to work with him. It had to help him. So, and it says this is from Michael Fairchild to John Summers, Cell, and then the DNR. You know, basically the city and the DNR. You know, this is part of the. On a different note, this is what Fairchild wrote. On a different note, the city has yet submitted the floodplain letter to WIDA, assuring them that the Wyco building is not in a 100-year floodplain. We believe that is required relative to the WIDA grant application approval tax credit for funding of the Wyco development. Per day that WIDA says they do not have said letter. And then he goes in here and kisses up to the city. Oh, that's going to be a great thing and all that. But you're welcome to read the whole thing if you want. But I don't want to make these episodes too long. Let's see. I wasn't sure exactly when Fairchild started working with the city. He didn't actually get paid. But he called a meeting and brought all the property owners and stuff like that. And in those first 2 articles in the first episode, I explained how he said, oh, it's either that or condemnation. Well, condemnation and condemn are 2 different words and are 2 different meanings. If you condemn somebody's building, it's what they call it for blighted purposes, you know, and if it's evacuated and they don't have occupancy permit, kind of like what they did at Fairchild's building, they can order that down over a period of time. See, I knew that law. And in the floodway, it's a 1-year period. If you have no economic activity. So that's why I had to fix my building. So that goes in, I'll get into that a little later. And this is another email from Robert Baldwin to Ken Johnson. See, I guess Baldwin worked for the state. I don't know if he did at this time. It says, thanks for your input on the meeting with us on Tuesday concerning the downtown issues facing our city. As you are aware, the city of Beaver Dam are committed to working hard to resolve the issues related to the past flooding for everyone's benefit. Out of our meeting, I wish to confirm one item. It's my understanding that at some point the properties are physically in the river. The removal costs will be solely that of the owner, and the owner would not be paid for the property. That is not to say other arrangements could be made, such as grants. In my understanding is not. In my understanding is not correct, please let us know. Okay. So this is off another letter from James Condon. It goes to Mayor Hankus, Lee Smith, Tom Marks, Ken Johnson, Rob Davis, Dan Hunt, Heather Gottschalk, Pam Biersack, Greg Matthews, Meg Galloway, and Greg Hendricks. This is what we're talking about for Fairchild's building. We say we cleared a standing structure to public safety hazard that a minimum amount of stabilization may be necessary to prevent a potential public catastrophe. I'd like the opportunity to work with you and provide you further advice on what we acceptable temporary stabilizations for your building. And it says down here, it says, you ask what your fines would be if you proceed with the without department authorization. So it sounds like they didn't want to allow him to fix it, even though he admitted it was a public safety issue. Wait to see if the issue can be resolved through enforcement of the city's floodplain ordinance. Issue a citation for the violation. Issue a citation and seek abatement of the violation. Refer the case to the Department of Justice. Yeah. one of the biggest criminal organizations that ever lived, Wisconsin DNR. They're going to report him to, okay. So now I'm going to get to this. Like I said, I don't want to make these episodes too long. I don't know if I showed you that later. My mind is just so full of this because there's just so many twists and turns on this thing. It'll make your head spin, even the people that hear it the first time. The city's offer and the addendum to purchase. I'm going to put this up here while I read this. This document is required to be signed by all property owners in order to sell their properties. Why would the city be worried about losses sustained from flooding? I showed you how the dam was operated. I showed you how that dam had a history of being unoperable, and also the scheduled repairs were not made on schedule. Sellers only signed this because of 9 months of threats, fear, false statements, because they were under constant duress. The whole threatening story of the buildings in the floodway was a hoax. I will explain in detail later. No one is to receive relocation. The city wrote down in that grant I showed you yesterday, and they received relocation, committing grant fraud in the process. They tried to say it was all properties They tried to say if all properties didn't fall for the blackmail conspiracy that the deal wouldn't go through. They used the term mutually agreeable term that was impossible because of no negotiations, and the state they had no separate terms. They know how corrupt the state is. No one is to be treated legally. In environmental liability, it clearly did not do the environmental report. The DNR went against all the morals by letting the city fill in the floodway and then never removing the lead paint. City broke in DNR, the Federal Environmental Protection Act. Yes, they did apply and receive this $2 million in TIF funding for projects. It's amazing how many times they received fundings for the properties, and especially mine. So I want to show you that one more time because this is very important. Now, the people had to sign this, okay? So, okay, if the property is currently leased, seller shall be responsible to terminate any leases with the current tenants below. It's the seller's responsibility and seller's expense to terminate any leases currently on the property. No persons or small business shall occupy the presence at that time. So if they would have gave them their relocation, which they should have at this time when they got this grant, their people's lives would have been a lot different. Okay. Sellers shall hold harmless the city of Beaver Dam, their elected officials, their legal counsel, and employees of any liability or losses sustained from the past flooding upon successful closing of this transaction. Sellers initiating this offer to sell at will. No, it wasn't at will. Blackmail is not at will. And seller and buyer are aware that the property is located in a floodway is a violation of Wisconsin statute regarding personal property over navigated. You know, it's like they discriminated against the people there because there's floodway and there's properties all over the whole state. But, you know, like I said, this all reinforces, you know, my thoughts on the dam. Seller and buyer acknowledge that neither seller nor tenant, person or business, will be provided any relocation payments. They didn't care about the people. Seller and buyer acknowledge that this offer to purchase subject to the satisfactory closing of all the following transactions simultaneously. So basically, this whole thing, it didn't happen simultaneously because I have my building on here, 203. So the whole thing, you just throw it in the garbage. It wasn't worth anything. Failure of any of these properties successfully close will result in termination of this contract unless buyer and seller can come to mutually agreeable terms. Each forfeited property sale is based on the 2008 assessed value, and no seller shall be compensated at a greater percentage or of assessed value. No separate party sale or terms should be provided to any floodway property seller. And this is why it took 5.5 years, okay, for my building to finally sell, because HUD came in, you know, did an investigation. Like I said, it took a year, and they had to go back and actually help these people. And in my next episode, I'm going to go through that whole federal report. The office continues on the upon the buyer receiving in writing environmental liability from the state of Wisconsin DNR for all acquired properties in a form acceptable to the buyer. DNR approval to include permits for the raising of the aforementioned buildings and to create appropriate shoreline to prevent continued erosion and present attractive improvements in downtown. The offer is contingent upon all approval is necessary for the creation of TIF 6 and amendment of TIF 3. This offer can depend on city approval of funding for the acquisition of the properties. So that's basically why they couldn't treat me fair and legally, because they didn't treat these people fair and legally. There were no appraisals. Yeah, it just, you can go on and on. But I'm going to leave this episode at that today, and I'm going to be coming back with episode 7. There's so much more, and I love you folks. Thank you. Oh yeah, I actually can't forget this, because, you know, if we don't stand up for our rights, you know, we're not going to have a country anymore.